I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7 p.m. Please call the roll.
Ms. Pearson?
Present.
Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Ms. Mohammed? Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 6 present, 1 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now take a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As we start each board meeting, it bears reminding that the mission of the Rockford Public Schools is to collectively engage all students in a first-class education for a changing world. Before we go any further, thank you, Connor Childers, who's working behind the scenes to produce the board's broadcast via YouTube live stream and Comcast Channel 20. I also wish to welcome the student representative from SSAC, Jay Gupta, from Auburn High School, and would like to make thank you for being here. And tonight's you're not going to talk to us, right? Is it? Yay. And I'd also like to point out the fact that as we are in the schools, masks are optional in the schools, and board members will have that opportunity to have them be optional as well on the board floor. We are now at the petitions and communications portion of our meeting when we invite the public to make comments. The Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Board Policy 2.230 governs. The board will not respond to comments at this time. If it's appropriate, you'll be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your question. Each speaker will be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board, and it is not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators, or to discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential in such an open meeting. If you look on your left, you'll see 2 digital clocks. One shows the total time allotted to public comment, and one shows total time for each speaker. Tonight we only have 1 speaker, so you just need to be aware of the 2 minutes, and we thank you for your interest and for your cooperation with our guidelines. Our speaker this evening is Elsie Wilson. And sir, you'll have to turn the mic on, I'm pretty sure. You can give it to the secretary and she'll pass those out. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Elsie Wilson. I served on the Winnebago County Board for nearly 15 years and have been concerned about the discipline policy for many years. School discipline is a necessary tool to help make a safe environment to learning in our schools. In my opinion, the district lacks African American, 1, teachers, 2, paraprofessionals, 3, administrators. Stand behind them and give them an attainable goal, 3 to 5 years, instead of every other year remove and replace. 4, school counselors have a direct relationship with students that are disciplined that are of color. Do you want to really get better with reducing discipline? May I suggest the need to seek out and hire more family outreach workers of color to help intervene in discipline scenarios? It is going to cost to add staff. Are you willing to try something else? What has been happening is not working. Improving trust seems to be part of this equation. Youth court was in this district years ago. I don't know what happened with youth court. What else has the board looked at that would enhance restorative type policies rather than out-of-school suspensions or Roosevelt School? May I offer another suggestion? Gather a group of cross-section students, grade ranges A through D, of maybe 9 or 10 students in some of the higher discipline schools. Do so by the demographics of District 205. Tell them we need your help and your input, and what can you, I get we, but I meant you because you're the board, do to help. Try this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. We are now on to board member comments. Are there any board members who would like to comment? Ms. Pearson?
Yes, thank you. I would like to acknowledge Ms. Turner at Ellis. I had an opportunity to visit Ellis School, and she's doing a phenomenal job, and I just want to encourage her to continue the work that she's doing. I walked in, it was very orderly. The staff was hospitable. The students were respectful, and it was controlled throughout the entire school, and we had a really good conversation, and I certainly appreciate her taking the time to meet with me. I also would like to acknowledge Ms. Rhonda Greer. I understand she is a 5th grade class, and her class tests very high in the math statewide, and I want to acknowledge those efforts. You know, we often not necessarily dwell, but we were frequently reminded of the lack of success. And so it's always refreshing to hear about the success stories that are going on in our classrooms. So I want to thank Ms. Turner and the entire staff at Ellis for such a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments from the board? All right, seeing none, I'm going to give the floor to the superintendent, Dr. Jarrett.
And I'm going to immediately give the floor to our student representative for the month of February from Auburn High School, Mr. Jay Gupta. He has taken part in, this is his 3rd board meeting for the month of February, and he had some insights and reflections he wanted to share about his personal experiences as a student, but also as our student representative during the month of February. The floor is yours, Mr. Gupta.
All right, thank you for the introduction, Dr. Jarrett. So good evening, everyone. I'm Pranjay Gupta, the chairperson of Dr. Jarrett's district-wide student council. I'm currently a senior at Auburn High School, and I've been a student of the Rockford Public School District since 1st grade. And today, I offer my perspective on policies and actions that I've observed the board discuss these past meetings. A major obstacle as one of the largest school districts in the state is communication. Communication exists as a core tenet of effective schooling, whether it's communication between administration and students or communication of the district with community partners. At its best, communication can serve as a foothold for increased opportunities. And at a district level, I have seen great strides in increasing interactions with both students and the community. Specifically, I saw the recent interactions and community involvement in regard to specific strategies to better reach underrepresented students. In addition, through the external shareholders event, the district has continued to communicate with businesses and local partners to increase the opportunities available to students in general. At a student level, student voice-based items such as the District 5 podcast have further still propagated student voice on a district level. However, these forms of communication should not cease here. I would urge the board to support opportunities for high schools to emphasize communication with their students. Individual schools are more cognizant of their students' needs and environment, and developing a personal relationship with students is more feasible at this smaller scale. By implementing those aforementioned district-level communication at a high school level, schools could more effectively reach students. And while it's important to establish relationships among students, let's also not forget the teachers. It's critical to communicate with teachers, as they serve as a crucial interface between students and administration. Specifically, I would urge the board to support more opportunities for teacher feedback in the classroom. Overall, I have seen great strides made in communication and collaboration at the district level, and I hope that the district promotes this improvement at a more school-specific level. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. You're a senior?
Yes.
And your plan for next year, do you have it solidified?
Well, not yet. We're still waiting on some college responses. I really want to hope to pursue medicine, so
Well, good luck to you. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay. Appreciate it. And now I want to move on to the ongoing presentation of the district system-wide framework. Today, I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. I want to highlight just one other additional piece. Again, our focus is on our equity imperative to interrupt predictability by zip code. And that is imaged, if you assume red, green, blue, green, and wanting all of our schools to be green and blue, and so every neighborhood would have that. This is what it may sort of look like now. This is where we want to go to ensure that all students have access to a high-quality school. One type of school that we have not talked about yet are the special programs. I want you to note that we are looking at a 75 to 25 scorecard to standard weighting ratio. We will continue to have a final conversation about this as a board at our strategic retreat in April. But again, we have talked about neighborhood schools being at 50% standards of practice, 50% scorecard, charters being 100%, and early childhood being 25-75. Special programs, by virtue of the additional freedoms that they have academically to run a special program, we have de-emphasized the standards of practice to a 75-25 ratio to allow for increased academic accountability, but also to take into account the increased freedom that these programs have. So 75-25 is the ratio we are proposing. An example of what this might look like at Marshall Elementary, Montessori, or Barber is outlined, and you can see that 3/4 of the points within that 75% come from the quality instruction factors. Climate and culture is 25 points, and that climate and culture continues on at the middle school level with slightly different academic metrics with pretty consistent climate and culture metrics. And then as we continue through the slides, you can again see what these standards of practice are. In these special programs, the quality instruction would really be limited to MTSS instead of having some of the more standardized academic programs that we offer throughout the district. MTSS is a standard of practice. We would want to continue here. That we think all programs should have high quality MTSS programs, whether they're a special program or not. So that would stay in. You can also see the three relating to quality relationships: student belonging, quality school quality survey, employee engagement survey. Those are practices we want to see across the board, as well as focusing on equity through data disaggregation and equity-based practices. So of the 8 that we typically have, we're keeping these 5. That's how we drop it from 50 to 25%. So it gives you kind of an idea of what this might look like if the board were to move in this direction. Again, I have included an example here of how the math might look. These are not real scores. These are hypothetical scores. And if you scroll to how the weighting would look differently, you can see how the scores are impacted by a higher weight on the school scorecard as opposed to the standard of practice. You can see that that has a significant impact in school scorecard being weighted much more heavily. Upcoming dates, again, we will be reviewing our district standards of service. This is where the district office takes its turn to be in the spotlight for continuous improvement, because high quality schools in every neighborhood and disrupting the predictability of outcomes requires a really strong district office. So we've surveyed our assistant principals and principals to ensure we are serving those schools correctly. You'll hear more about that at our committee of the whole meeting. We are also going to be talking about our quality and school improvement cycles. We have our board retreat coming up and some decisions about 3-, 4-, and 5-year tracks to support schools depending on how they're performing once we get our baseline data in November of 2022. So a lot of conversations still to be had, but again, I just wanted to carve out a tiny little bit of time today to talk about a different weighting formula for special programs that emphasizes scorecard and de-emphasizes standards of practice, but maintains an emphasis on 5 really important standards of practice. So with that, that concludes my report.
Mr. Rollins.
I just had a question. So is Haskell not considered a special program? Why was that not included in this?
We just use those as examples on the slide, but Haskell would be included as a special program, Mr. Rollins.
Mr. Connor.
Yep, and just to be clear on the assumptions that the standards of practice are assumed to be more, if you will, borne by the special programs. So that's why the emphasis is on that result is that, in effect, those, because they are special programs, are responsible for their standards of practice.
That's right. So, for example, Montessori would be a great example that instead of the emphasis on the district-wide reading programming, the implementation of Montessori would be something that Montessori would be responsible for. So that would, to your point, be the reason why we place much more emphasis on academic results, because they technically would not be implementing some of the district-wide curriculum framework concepts.
So to that end, and out of curiosity, because I think most of the special programs are based on national standards, for lack of a better term, for the arts and STEM, whatever. So that the point would be, would it make sense to have something like that as part of sort of the oversight of what's going on? Is not necessarily have it every year, but almost, I hate to use the word audit, everybody's favorite word, but some oversight that there's a comfort level that the standards that are being used are, good for, gifted arts, what have you.
Excellent point. We've had detailed conversations and modeled it out both ways. In talking to the principals, we ultimately felt that they would like to the accountability coming on the actual academic results is what the board is really focused on anyways, in a lot of the board level conversations we're having. So we really felt like that should be a self-study. The district also does not have the capacity to have the same level of effectiveness in monitoring those programs. So a self-analysis without it counting to the scorecard is where we landed in terms of our suggestion to the board. But Mr. Connor, to your point, that is something that we absolutely did discuss.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to add costs, because all this is cost, and I totally understand that. The only thing I'm thinking is that if you had programs, and you're right, Montessori is probably the best example, but even for the arts, and I'm assuming for gifted, I mean, there are some, generalized goals, and while academics are certainly buried in that, they have specific standards. And I would think that there would be something that would reflect saying, as a fine art, this is it. As a dance, this is it. As theater, as music, I think that there are some things, and I don't know the gifted part as well, but I assume that that's also true, even though that's academic and origin. But anyway, that would be a suggestion. And
Thank you, Mr. Connor.
Mr. Let me think, Siegel. I'm not used to you being next to me.
Change in variables. So what does it look like to incorporate the middle school on track for Barber and Montessori? How does that affect their numbers?
Mm-hmm. So we'll walk through that in much more detail when you get the first example, but essentially that we will have to balance out the K-5 score with the 6-8 score. So I don't have a specific formula nailed down today, but when we actually roll those out in November, we will be able to discuss that. And as we discuss how to do that, we can finalize how to weight the K-8 schools. Because I think the K-8 schools do pose a challenge in terms of the numeric values, which is an excellent point.
Mr. Connor.
All I was going to say, since you brought up Barber, I know that there was a difference in emphasis when those programs went to embedding the second language really in the various programs, in science and so forth. And so I would think that there might be some standards of achievement that to have that balanced view of language, and that would be something that we could actually look at. Mm-hmm. It's just, the only comment I'll have is if it were, corporate, which it's not, but in analogy that if you have the accounting function and you're an insurance company, there are standards of practice around accounting or, sales for that matter, whatever. And typically those kinds of comparisons are done to make sure that all kids are getting really, the exposure to the highest quality. So
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other lights, we'll move on. Mr. Rollins, you do not have any action items from the Planning and Development Committee, but you do have an agenda item to present, so I'll give you the floor for.
Well, I will not be presenting these. These are the preliminary budget requests, and we have preliminary budget requests from several departments. We start with financial services. Mr. Brown.
All right, good evening. So tonight we're going to run through the financial services budget presentation. So first off, our goal is resource allocation. And the services that we provide to the district are summarized there: the budgeting, payroll, purchasing and accounts payable, cash receipts, accounting and financial reporting, the grant expenditure reporting, insurance claims, and investments in cash management. This is our team. You can see that we have leads in a number of different areas in finance, budgeting, payroll, and also in purchasing. And the next couple of slides are the breakdowns between those departments. And you can see that we're staffed with a variety of different positions: accountants, finance technicians, accounts payable folks, budgeting folks, purchasing department, and also payroll. Our highlights this year, we have had an excellent track record as far as financial reporting goes. You can see the awards that have been received by the district over the last number of years. The ISB Financial Profile Score also sits at 3.8, which is an excellent rating. That's out of a 4.0 scale, and anything above 3.5 is recognition status, and the district has maintained that for a number of years, and that's also an impressive highlight. On the auditing side of things, we have had no material findings or internal control deficiencies for the past 4 years. As Ann Noble stated when she was here at the beginning of the month in February, the district did get a credit rating upgrade to AA-, which was outstanding, and also the bond refunding did end up saving taxpayers $6.1 million on a gross basis and $5 million on a net present value basis. So that was a big highlight for the department this year. Spent a lot of work on the collaboration with all of the ESSER grants. Been a tremendous amount of work to keep that coordinated. We do provide a lot of support on the grant side of things, not only with the amendments and the original approvals, but then also the expenditure reporting as the money on the grants is expended. As we did this, we had distributed more than 7,700 gift cards for the COVID-19 vaccines. I think we're closer to 8,000 on that now. So the numbers have increased significantly just in the last couple of weeks. We have improved on the bidding that we use by having an e-bidding software. We've also done a lot of individual outreach when bids are going to be going out. We make sure that we reach out to vendors that we think might be interested in bidding on our projects. So we don't just post them on the website. We don't just email them out. We're actually making phone calls now to make sure that people know that the projects that we have coming up are ready for bid. Just that continuous procurement of supplies, and then that'll just kind of give you a rough idea of the volume of goods and services that went out over the last 12 months. So about $125 million and 7,500 purchase orders. As you know, we did have a ransomware attack on the Kronos system. That's our timekeeping system that did affect payroll for a period of time in the middle of December through about the middle of January, and then we were able to work our way out of that one. We were able to maintain payroll, and everybody did get paid. It was quite an adventurous month. We did extend arbiter pay for officials to the middle schools now, so that's an automated process for us. And we have started to begin a review of our internal processes. We're starting out with accounts payable right now, and we're going to work our way through all of our areas just to see what efficiencies we can gain in our departments as we move forward. A lot more work on the site-based budgeting that we've done. We not only held the online budget workshops this year, but we also did in-person budget workshops for the buildings as well, if they wanted to come in and get some personalized one-on-one time. And then we've also developed training videos that we have on the district's intranet site for people to reference back to as they're working their way through process and procedures that we have in our department. So as far as budget goes, you can see there the budget for FY22 and then what we're proposing for FY23. The variance in salary and benefits is due largely to proposed increases for salaries and also the increases for insurance, the health insurance costs. As you know from the insurance presentation that Matt did a couple weeks ago, we are expecting our insurance costs to go up on the health insurance side of things. Purchase services, there's a small increase there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we hit the contract tab. We're projecting about a $6,000 increase in supplies as well. As far as contracts go, you can see that we only have a handful in our department. Some are up, some are down. The Forecast 5 is down a little bit. We're cutting back on a couple of the licenses that we've had in the past that weren't utilized, and we don't need them anymore. We did have a little bit of an increase on the in-touch receipting. The big increase in our purchase services comes from the contracts on the audit side of things. We do have a contract, this is the last year of it, with Baker Tilly to do the external audit. That will be one that will go out for bid next year. And then Grant Thornton does what's called an OPEB audit, and that's for post-employment benefits that we have to get actuarial valuations on for the audit. And so that one will be coming up as well. As far as new requests for the coming year, we really would like to, if all possible, add a budget coordinator, another one. We do have one. With the site-based budgeting and spending that we're doing, we really feel like we could use some additional supports at the building level. And not only with preparing the budgets and also with the spending, but we have a lot of monies on grants that seem to carry over from year to year. And so if we could capture a lot of those unspent funds, especially on like the title grants and things like that, we actually are able to recover a portion of our indirect costs from those grants. And we carried over about $15 million in unspent title monies over to this current year. And if we could capture just $1.4 million of that spend, that grant position would actually pay for itself with the increased dollars that we would be able to capture on the indirect costs. So that one would seem to us, we feel like we could really capture at least $1.4 million of that carryover next year, and that this position would pay for itself. The other thing that we're looking at is contract management software. We're hoping to better manage our contracts. We do a good job on managing them now, but we have an awful lot of them. You don't see a lot in our financial services, but when Jason gets up here and presents his, you'll see about 7 pages worth of contracts that we're managing right now, not to mention all the ones that come up on the academic side as well. So we're looking at the possibility of adding that as well. So that is it for the request. As far as return on investment, our goal is really those effective internal controls, gaining efficiencies like we talked about, hanging on to our staff, really having reliable financials and transparent financials for the board and the community, and then really just being a good steward of taxpayer money. And then, again, capturing as many grant dollars as possible. So I'll take any questions anybody might have.
Hi, I'm sorry if I misunderstood. Can you clarify for me? Did you mention that in the past year or just in the past in general that we had the $15 million unused grant dollars?
We had $15 million that we were able to carry over from last year to this year, and those are available for use this year as well, in addition to the grant allocations that we had this current year.
Okay, so we haven't lost it. We're still able to use it.
We have not lost it.
Okay.
Correct.
And can you give just a little bit of backstory of how we have have so much that rolls over? Is it like reporting issues like on the back end, or just how are we not able to use such a huge chunk of money?
Sure, great question. And the large part of it, to be perfectly honest with you, is our inability to be able to hire staff in a lot of the title positions right now. It's been extremely tough to staff up in a lot of the positions that we had hoped to fill. And because we weren't able to fill those dollars then carried over to the next year. And so that's primarily really been it, is that we just haven't been able to find all the staff to fill all the positions.
Are there particular areas that are more understaffed than others?
I'll be honest with you, just kind of looking at it, and again, I've only been here for a couple months. A lot of it was in the Title I programming, and I think a lot of it in reading. And you know, that's, I'll kind of lean on Heidi and Morgan here, but I think it's probably a lot to do with we just can't find the staff.
That's correct. I mean, you could just make the assumption the higher the credentialing required for the position, which often would be those Title I positions, the more difficult it is to fill. There's just not the supply there. I would also just add that with regards to the school-based budgets, any of the rollover that they had in title funding, it's difficult for the schools to spend money on kids that they're not seeing in person. So last year when we had so few students in person, it's difficult to get the resources to the kids.
And there was a massive flood of dollars that came upon the system because of the COVID relief dollars, as well as the title dollars arrived really, really late. So you don't want to just spend money to spend money. We chose to roll it over so we could be more strategic in how we invest it.
And the nice thing is right now they're allowing that unlimited carryover of the title dollars, whereas if we did not spend the ESSER dollars, those would have been gone. So the ESSER dollars were really coming in first.
Since you're talking about those dollars, would it be okay if the Title I funds, we can't always roll over all of those funds, can we? I think there's what is that restriction? It's a percentage?
Yeah, there was a restriction in prior years. Now, lately, because of the ESSER dollars coming in and the COVID situation, they have allowed, that unlimited rollover. I suspect that will change here somewhere in the future, but there had been limitations in the past on how much you could roll over. They were always good about 15 or 20%, but right now they are allowing that unlimited rollover. So we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that as much as we can. And
do we expect we'll be able to roll some over again, or are we trying to spend that $15 million?
I think we'll be able to roll it over again next year. Every indication is that we'll be able to roll it over. I don't know if you've heard anything different than that.
I haven't. We're encouraging schools to spend the money on extended time programs throughout the summer or after school, et cetera. And we're trying to support them in getting that to spending through that carryover. Otherwise, it continues to carry over. Yeah. And so we end up with more resources than can reasonably be used within a school year. So we're encouraging schools to invest that into extended time for student learning.
And so being in such a flush position, are there any other grants that didn't get spent and we could not roll over? Is there any other grant money?
Not really, to be honest with you. Like a lot of the other grants really were spent down pretty well. It was mainly the title grants, and a lot of that did have to do with all the ESSER money that was available and got prioritized on the spend out of the title dollars, knowing that they could be carried forward.
Okay. And one other question was, what is arbiter pay for officials to middle schools and elementary extracurricular activities?
So arbiter pay is a system that K-12 schools use and also NCAA schools use to pay officials. And so officials can actually sign up and get paid electronically. Rather than us having to input a lot of individual invoices for officials and then cut checks, the officials are actually entered into the system. Our athletic directors actually approve that they were at the game and worked the game, and then we can go in electronically and pay them directly. So it's a very, very efficient process.
So are we doing that in high schools already, and we're just extending it now to middle school and elementary? Is that what it is?
Correct. Yep. And we're also using it for the elementary basketball league as well.
And the internal processes in the AP area, please remind me, what does that AP stand for?
Accounts payable.
Oh, Okay, well, financial people would think that automatically. I would not. So. Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I've got a few questions. First, on slide 132, I always love identifications, even if it's, a couple hundred slides, is it talks about the e-bidding software. I know that we've had some issues about getting enough bidders. So what actually, and help me out, what part did the software help in terms of either process or follow-up or?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm going to ask for Dane to give us a little help here. Dane Youngblood is our purchasing manager, and he's in a better position to answer that than I am.
I can send you some data tomorrow, but we have increased our number of bids overall by about, I believe it's like one bid per bid, which is, about 18% increase in number of bids that we've received. Okay.
So, and it's clear, and just for the public, the 5 people that are here, thank you very much for sitting through all this, is that we tend to get better costing the more bidders that we have. So clearly that's one part of it. And I do like, one comment is, it says continuous procurement of supplies and services needed to maintain in-person learning. I think one of the things that I will say, and I think the financial area has done well, is to tie things back to educational goals. That is something we've done, and the emphasis with our ESSER and ESSER dollars as supporting education. I think that there's probably a lot of people that have a lot of misunderstanding about what that is, and my one comment is where I think finance has done a particularly good job, and I would say operations, is the fact that a building that has problems with air quality and all the rest, has problems in education. So I'm really happy to see this, and I think the reflection is on how good a job we're doing. And it brings me to my second question. You said $125 million in goods and services through 7,500 purchase orders. I think one of the things that I'd ask, and I think education is like a lot of industries, there are benchmarks that say for every, I'm going to make it up, for every $50 million in goods and services, your support staff should look like the following, you know what I mean? Your overhead costs are the following. I think it would be good to see how we stand on that. My suspicion is we're probably pretty good, but when I look at numbers like that, I think that some of my immediate questions are, and just again for the public, we've been roundly criticized many times about overhead, and one of the things I'd like to say is I think our overhead is actually pretty good. And so then I'm going to make another comment on one of the positions in a minute, but I think those kinds of numbers for the public are really helpful. So I'm glad that you brought that in there and those numbers, because I think the numbers are powerful. The other part is, if I can find it, I apologize, I had to go back and forth, is that, well, now I lost it because I don't have the slide, but I think that the kinds of things that we're doing to help, that the 2 positions, I'm looking for that, I apologize, but one is the, thank you. Yeah, one is the budget coordinator, and one of the things I'd ask on that is if we do that position, and it seems like it makes a lot of sense, because we've added the site-based budgeting, I think, it's not a lot of money, but I think it's going to be very helpful to the principals. It would help, I'm just speaking for myself, but I suspect in general, is to have something from the principals to say, this is going to help us, in terms of how we do it, the quality of what we do, the amount of time, and I assume that position, one of their goals is to reduce the time that the individual principals have to do and to give them baselines to help them with this process, because we want principals to focus on education. And so a lot of these other things, if you have help, I'm assuming that's one of the goals. So I would like to suggest that that's something, if we're going to add that kind of position, let's make sure that we hear from the principals of that benefit. And I have to say the same on the contract management software is similar to that, just like the question to Ms. Youngblood earlier was, what kinds of benefits are we getting from that? I think if we're going to do this kind of software, and I think it's a really good idea, it's good to see the benefit. One of the things, again, I'll point out is the complexity of the federal contracts, if you follow that on our ESSER and ESSER, is considerable. And the fact that we could lose a lot of money by not taking advantage of it to the tune of, I think, millions of dollars, the fact that we've outlined that is a real credit both to operations and the financial area. So I think those are the kinds of things that people need to hear about and be highlighted, because we have to do this. We're a large organization. We have hundreds of $millions in an operating in an operating budget, and I think that's very complex. So I'm glad that you're putting these things in here, and I think that overall what I'd like to see during the year is how are we doing on some of these, and to make sure that in particular the principals and others really see that benefit, because my suspicion it's there. And so I'm just going to say I'm glad that you're adding a couple of these, but we'll just need to make sure that we monitor that. Sure. So, thanks.
I have a question or a statement in regards to the Title I that you also mentioned. And I just want to add that I understand that we perhaps have some guidelines in place as to how we want to utilize that Title I, but I would also like to share or suggest that we also give the principals and consulting their team and how to utilize those Title I funds as well. That I recall having a meeting with Dr. Wolf, and he kind of explained to me some guidelines and how those monies can be used. So there's a difference between what they can be used for and what our district approved for them to be used, if I understood him correctly, and I believe I did. So I would like for that to see that be specifically in Subdistrict A, a broader use. And we're not doing bad in terms of, from the feedback that I'm getting from most administrators in Subdistrict A. However, I do recall a conversation where Title I funding could have been used and was denied. So I would like for us to take a look at the need and really hear administrators in the use of those funds since they're there. Thank you.
He turned it off, sorry. And now we get to talk about how the board and superintendent dollars are invested. This is the department that supports our work together, your one employee and the Board of Education. Actually, one of two. Promote all district goals. Assessing the situation, you can see this, you have with the superintendent, you have the manager of the office, Amy Lozano, and then you have the board coordinator, Laura Fromm, and we support the cabinet and the board. Board governance, the PDSA and academic ROI process, scorecard support, lobbying, community partnerships, as well as supporting the district's strategic priorities collectively are all part of what we do on a very, very high level. This is our overview of the budget. You'll notice, as Mr. Brown pointed out, the variance with salary and benefits with 3 employees really does come down largely to those increases in insurance with some modest projected salary increases. You can see the other numbers are largely pretty consistent. We balanced that out. We had some decrease in miscellaneous costs, but we've had some other slight increases. These are the 3 significant contracts that are managed. Just to give you some context, Zephyr Government Strategies is our lobbying firm. Proud to say that we have kept that contract consistent since its inception in 2013. That has not increased. The Diligent Corporation is board docs. So that is an important investment, and we did see a slight uptick in the charge for the board doc software, very important. And then Alignment Rockford is consistent year over year. We are really looking to Alignment Rockford to help manage some of this ARP-ESSER investment. The Live, Learn, Play investment is going to be a big opportunity, along with some other community partners. We're looking for ways to engage in significant investment of dollars to extend time to our students. Alignment Rockford also is going to be heavily involved in the very beginning of work from birth to 5. So those are the 3 existing contracts. This has yet to come before the board, but I do plan to bring a proposal forward to expand our investment in Rockford Promise. City of Rockford invests $1.5 million a year to directly support tuition to Northern Illinois University. If we were to make an investment in Rockford Promise, we would not be able to actually provide tuition assistance, but we could help create a position that would support the K-12 work to ensure more and more students are able to qualify for that. It also would free up cash that Rockford Promise is currently fundraising to utilize for the NIU housing expansion, so that more and more of our scholars who decide to go to Northern Illinois University can choose to live on campus. Statistically speaking, that increases success rates very significantly. It also could allow Rockford Promise to do additional fundraising for expansion to Rock Valley and Rockford University for scholarships. This is not before you today as an official decision, but it will be coming before you as a PDSA is coming through cabinet, and I just wanted to give you a heads up that this could be part of the budget discussion, assuming it progresses past cabinet, and give you a first look here. So that is the return on investment ultimately ties into our governance work. We're a team between our cabinet and our board, and we really are trying to ensure success in all of our strategies. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions and then hand it over to the next person.
Tim, it's your committee. You get to call on people.
Yeah. Mr. Connor.
Yeah, I think this is similar to the same comment I had before about the finance department. Is I think it would be good, and I think we had something that compares similar sized districts in terms of the overhead, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be useful for us to see what that is. Because again, I'll say it, I think there's a lot of people that criticize the overhead, and frankly, and what's our operating budget going to be for next year? What's the proposal?
I think all told it's going to be close to $500 million.
Almost $500 million, right? And the thing that I'd say is I think it's really important to understand what other $500 million organizations do and have for overhead. I know that having worked in the financial industry for a long time, that was actually one of the key numbers we looked at every year, was how much is our overhead compared to others. My suspicion is it's actually probably fairly good, but I don't know. So I think that would be helpful, and not just the superintendents, but I think all the, all the non-education departments, if I might call it that, is to see. And I think it's worthwhile doing that year over year. And I know we've talked about this in the past.
Mrs. Yar did calculate this, and so Mr. Brown can, or Dr. Brown, excuse me, can review our work and determine where we're at. I believe we were around somewhere between 9 and 10% of central office expenditures.
Okay, it's been a while, but I think that is something that that we can do, and I would say that. It would help put things in perspective when we talk, not just to community groups, frankly, but to our own staff, is to have a realistic view about what we do. I think the other part here, if I might say so, is I think that the amount of positions, and I said this with Mr. Brown on that new coordinator position, I think it would be very helpful. There's a lot that we as a board have done to make the job of the principal more complex. And that's something, and we did it because we think it's something that's the right thing to do, but it does mean that there are a lot more items that they're responsible for, and we have to help them succeed. Because most of them have advanced degrees in education, not in doing budgets, not in doing social work or what have you. And so I think it's important that we support at every level And it seems like we're doing a lot of that. So I think that let's compare ourselves and let's be transparent about what we have and perhaps what we might need and where that fits with that overall. So I will just say, I think if I compare it to when I started, I think both the financial reporting, the position we're in, a lot of that is really good. And I will comment that I think a lot of people have taken that for granted. And they should look around the state and see the school districts that are having money problems, because you can't help kids if you have money problems. And we've done a really good job at that. So I think that that's something that we should go out and make it clear to people. And even from the superintendent's office, from my standpoint, there's a lot of things we're doing, and we're trying to really reach out and make it a better experience at that principal and that school level. So I really, I'm on my soapbox tonight, but you know what? Too bad. I feel strongly that these are things that people ought to know about.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. And now I'm going to turn it over to our next, to Mr. Rollins, but I believe we're moving on to the legal department.
That's correct. So Ms. Goldsmith? Ms. Goldsmith.
Good evening. I'm Yashika Goldsmith, the Deputy General Counsel, and I'll be presenting the legal department's budget tonight. We are supporting Goal 5. The legal department continues its efforts to support the responsible planning and management of district finances and operations. In addition to myself, the legal team is comprised of our General Counsel, Lori Holy. We have an executive assistant, 2 investigation managers, a paralegal, and an internal auditor. Highlights for this year: the legal department worked with the technology department to implement the Student Online Personal Protection Act. The intent of the act is to protect student data when it's collected by educational technology companies. In the fall, the Chicago Sun-Times reported that CPS lost access to many of its key programs for students because it had a quote-unquote onerous contract process. Working closely with Jason and his department, we were able to implement a process that did not deprive our students of key programs, and the process was implemented well ahead of the mandated implementation date. Another highlight for the department is that we've assisted with 17 home purchase closings thus far in FY22. We have 5 on the books, a couple this week, and about 3 more within the next month. So that program is going really well and benefits a lot of people within the district. With regard to outside counsel services, we continue to use outside counsel to support student discipline matters, residency disputes, and in special education due process matters. We also use outside counsel with respect to employment matters and complex business matters. Looking at our budget, for FY23, salaries and benefits slightly increased due to annual increases, anticipated annual increases, and slight increased costs for benefits. Purchase services essentially remains the same. We have a slight increase due to internal auditor training and certifications. Supplies decreased slightly because we had previously budgeted for periodicals and subscriptions that were not being used, so those were removed from the budget. Non-capital and other miscellaneous expenditures remain the same. The legal department has 1 contract that we use, and that is our legal research tool, Westlaw. And that budgeted amount is remaining the same for FY23. We have no new requests for FY23. Looking more in depth at the outside counsel expenditures, for FY23, we've budgeted the same amount as we did for FY22. It should be noted that for FY22, we do anticipate going slightly over the budgeted amount because of carryover of REA negotiations, unanticipated increase in student discipline costs. We have the cost of hearing officers and representing the district when students are represented by attorneys. And there's also an uptick in some of our litigation that had been ongoing. So the legal department will continue its efforts to control risk, enforce district policies and procedure, manage the legal business of the district, and support the ongoing internal audit activity. I can take any questions if you have them.
Ms. Pearson?
Thank you. So for the sake of public knowledge, can you elaborate more on the purpose of outside counsel where it relates to discipline versus utilizing our in-house counsel?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So this year, nationwide, there's been an unanticipated uptick in student discipline matters related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Previously, we were able to handle the majority of the cases internally with a hearing officer being outside counsel that's paid for by the district. But internally, I was handling many of those matters. This year with the uptick, we had to send quite a few more of those outside to outside counsel, and we also had to bring on additional hearing officers.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Goldsmith.
I do.
Next
I
up
do.
is...
Could I ask a question?
Oh, did somebody have a question?
What's ERISA, you guys in your letters?
ERISA? That's the federal statute that governs employee benefits.
Okay. Well, again, AP, by the way, was assistant principals.
Yes. Yep. And it specifically is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. And it sets the standards for retirement and health plans.
Thank you for your help with that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is that it? We're moving on to technology services. Mr. Barthel.
Good evening. Mine won't be quite as short as Ms. Goldsmith's, but I'll try to get through this. We're a pretty contract-heavy department, as Dr. Brown had mentioned. I'll be presenting the technology services budget here this evening. We support Goal 3, optimal climate, facilities and technology for Strategy 5. Here's an overview of our 4 departments that fall under me. We have educational technology that's overseen by Susan Urim, information services that's led by Chris Taskey, ITIS security, which is overseen by Matt Johnson, and technology services, which is our help desk and our field support team, which is currently an open position that we're hoping to have filled here very shortly. Here's a closer view at the educational technology department overseen by Susan Urim. The teacher technology support specialists are teachers in the building that get paid a differential to support our integration of digital citizenship as well as our technology embedded curriculum in our buildings. Here's an overview of our information services department, which is comprised of our database administrators, our application support, and our student information and business systems within the district. Here's our ITIS security team overseen by Matt Johnson, which is primarily our infrastructure team, as well as our security, cybersecurity team that supports our systems 24/7, 365. And here's our technology services staff, which is comprised of our help desk, as well as our field support, and those are our individuals that are out in the buildings every day with our teachers and administration. Here's some of the highlights from the past year for technology services. We did replace 538 smart boards for our elementary schools, which completes the deployment of that phase of our process. If you recall, a couple of years ago, we did the same thing with middle schools, and we're moving forward with high schools here in FY24. We refined the one-to-one student device refresh plan, and we'll discuss that here in the budget here shortly on what that means. We enhanced our cybersecurity controls during a year when cyber attacks peaked. As Dr. Brown mentioned earlier, we did have a ransomware attack with a third-party provider, but everything that we had full control of, we did a fantastic job at keeping our internal infrastructure safe over this past year. We upgraded and enhanced our security camera infrastructure, working with the security services department and providing more clear cameras and the ability to have longer retention periods for our surveillance cameras in our buildings. As Ms. Goldsmith mentioned, we did assist with the implementation of the SOPA compliance process, and as you'll see later in the presentation, we requested additional dollars for software to support that in FY22, and we were able to actually do that at zero cost with current software we had in-house. And our ed tech team, and we worked on drafting digital skills rubric for digital citizenship in our classrooms and embedded digital scope and sequence to develop our young students with digital citizenship. Here's an overview of our total budget. As a whole, we're asking for an increase of $2.7 million. You'll notice salaries and benefits, just like everybody else, we had that slight increase because of health insurance and some cost of living raises across the board. Purchase services has a significant decrease because we did complete a 3-year lease on our computers, 5,038 computers that we purchased in FY19. So that was a rather large expense that we no longer have. We did build those out to be able to last us for 5 years for a life cycle on those, so we won't be seeing that cost until at least FY24. You'll notice a substantial increase in our supplies budget. This is the $3.2 million increase. This is going to be an annual cost that we're going to see with what one-to-one device to student program is going to look like. We looked at it overall. We did purchase quite a few of these in FY20 with ESSER dollars, and we are continuously sending devices home. Now that we are one-to-one district, our total cost of ownership for a 4-year life cycle is actually $12.8 million for the devices, the hardware, and the cases. So we went ahead and put a 4-year refresh plan starting in FY23 going forward. This is something that we've been working very close with finance on and have had some dollars pre-budgeted in the last 2 fiscal years to support this effort. The non-capital, you'll see a small decrease, a decrease of $228,000. We had a couple one-time spends. As you recall, we did approve, I think it was last board meeting, for Kronos time clocks. We did advance that into FY22, which was $67,000 of that, and then we also had some one-time infrastructure costs for security, camera, server infrastructure for that retention that I mentioned earlier. Capital, we have an increase there as well, and this is specifically for some of our 5-year planning that we're working on and getting multi-carrier cell repeaters on all the buildings for life safety. And then just a small increase on our other miscellaneous, which is specifically for an ISTE membership contract for our ed tech team. I've broken the next few slides out into specific buckets for our contracts and categories. The first one we're looking at here is IT security and backup. You'll notice some increases across the board. I'll just highlight the large ones and open it up for questions at the end. Our IT security agreements, you see an $85,000 increase. There's 2 additional initiatives that we're going to be doing this year for expansion for redundant paths for our disaster recovery site that we have that is about 37 miles down the road from us to allow better uptime and availability in the event that we have a catastrophe. And then the other piece is we're introducing another tier of backups for our critical systems here in the next year. The next 2, the milestone camera licensing and the S2 keyless access, is specifically the software that we purchase, and we've had with securities work with some expansion in our buildings for cameras and replacement of cameras. That's additional licensing that we have to purchase to support that, and the same thing with our keyless access. I just want to point out on the internet service vendors, you'll see that as the $825,000 for FY22 and the $830,662 for FY23. That is an E-ratable expense, so we get 90% of that reimbursed on an annual basis for our internet service. The next one is our student resources and our remote. Just a couple things I want to point out here. If you look at the Comcast Internet Essentials, about halfway down there, we did budget for an additional cost increase there. About a year and a half ago, we brought this to board with the ability to sponsor up to 1,000 families to provide internet services in their home. Our first year, we only had 160 families that took advantage of that. This past year, we're up to 245, and we project we're going to see about 300 here in the coming year. And that is actually Emergency Connectivity Fund, which is part of the whole ARP reimbursement process. We're able to get that funded at 100% through that program. I mentioned it earlier, but you'll see the computer lease year of 3 of 3, and that's why we have a significant savings on the bottom line of this one. These are our business operations applications. We mentioned, okay, so the first one is PowerSchool. This is our eSchool, our student information system, as well as our Business Plus financial system. We did do a little bit of contract cleanup to remove some of the features that we weren't using and haven't used in a number of years to be able to bring that cost down a little bit. The time clock replacement, as I mentioned earlier, we did advance that into FY22 and purchase those all up front. So we have a $67,000 cost savings for FY23. A few more business operations. You'll see on the bottom, online enrollment and registration. Mr. Dodson mentioned this in his briefing. We did budget for that. We'll actually be going out to bid here and probably about the next 30 days. We're wrapping up the next couple weeks. We've been working very, very diligently with the different departments and collaborating to get that bid specification put together. So we're really excited about moving forward with that. Here's some of our tech development contracts that we have. We use various vendors for network consulting. We did budget additional dollars for that in FY23 because we do have a large number of new network infrastructure devices that are coming in and want some oversight and management of that to get those implemented and reconfigured from a secure perspective in our buildings. I want to point out the device repair. We did anticipate $70,000 increase. We've had some significant numbers of broken devices with our take-home devices for our students, and we're currently sitting at projecting $330,000 for this year, and that wasn't an expense. We didn't know where that was going to land. This is really our first full year doing one-to-one and take-home to that extent, so we want to make this a more predictable approach. So we're looking at other options that would be a predictable expense and not a cost that we're passing on to our parents and our students for broken devices. And that's something that's happening now with fines for broken devices. So that's something that we're trying to work on for FY23. And then you'll see the last two are just some companies that we use to help us with our dashboard development, specific to our system-wide framework and our standards of practice dashboards that we're continuing to use to help us get those aligned here. These are some of our telephony and communication contracts that the top one is our AT&T, our phones in our district, as well as some of our elevators and our gas meters throughout the district. You'll see with School Messenger, third from the bottom there, we did have a decrease of $12,000 there. We were using that vendor, Intrado, as our RPS 205 app company, and we did communications did work with the final site vendor who we transferred to over earlier this year. CDW with the Go Guardian web filtering, we are extending our web filtering. We're increasing in that because we have a different solution with our iPads right now. We want to be consistent across the board with all of our devices, Chromebooks and iPads. So we're in compliance using one software instead of two. As I mentioned earlier, the SOPA software that we did budget for $75,000 in FY22, we were able to use a software that we already had in-house. Many other districts paid for a separate software, and it's worked out really well for us, and we were very transparent in what software we've approved to be SOPA compliant and where they are at in that process. here's these two contracts here. These are district-wide contracts. They don't specifically live in the IT budget. These are actually charged back to multiple departments and buildings throughout the district. But we wanted to be transparent and capture these contracts on what they look like as a whole throughout the district. And I manage the contracts, so that's why they're here. You'll see the copier lease, which is $450,000. We are going to bid for a new one. We're actually, we've hit our 5 years with the current, and that'll be going out, I think, this Thursday, so it may not be Marco Technologies, but that'll be coming forward here shortly. And then the AT&T FirstNet, that's our cellular contract that we have across the board. We have 372 cellular devices throughout the district. And here's just some miscellaneous contracts that we have, relatively small contracts. I want to point out the LinkedIn Learning, that's specific to IT, our technology services. We've actually had 13 certifications in the past year that we're able to get our staff to pick up. So it's been really, really productive and a great platform for us to continue our education to support the district. And finally, we do have an additional request for FY23 if you approve. With educational technology, we have a secondary ed tech innovation instructor that supports our teacher technology support specialists in the buildings. And we're looking to add an elementary ed tech innovation instructor to continue to support that work, really targeted towards our elementary buildings. And that's to continue to, for ed tech professional development, which is definitely something we need to continue to improve on, as well as implementing the ISTE standards, digital scope and sequence, and really pave that pathway for digital citizenship within our buildings for our students. Here's our return on investment. We'll continue to provide secure and available technology access. We'll continue application support and training for our teaching staff to enrich education, and we'll continue to develop dashboards and reports for data-driven decision-making. Okay, at this time, I'll open it up for any questions you may have.
Mr. Connor?
So I've got a number of questions. Let me start with almost an accounting question, which is that it seems odd to me that we're putting equipment under supplies. That just, it doesn't, and I know, and these are supplies because they're purchases and not leases, I assume, or?
Is it specific to the Chromebook?
Well, it's, all I know is it said supplies, and then it had several other, as Mr. Bartel pointed out, several other categories, and it just seems, to my eye, odd to call that supplies, because that's not necessarily what you think of as supplies. And
yeah, that shift happened, I believe it was either 4 or 5 years ago. The accounting industry went away from capitalizing Chromebooks because they become so inexpensive and basically have been treated as a supply now. Because by individual purchase, they're under $500 a piece. And so the only thing that for accounting purposes now we capitalize are actually like laptops or desktops or things like that. They treat Chromebooks now generally as a supply.
Yeah, and I totally, now that you remind me, I kind of remember that, but it struck me as odd as I was looking at this. So it is just the Chromebooks that are like that. All right, I just think it would be, helpful. So I've got a couple other things. One is that, and I apologize, I got to get back to the right thing. On slide 174, it said replaced 538 smart boards. Out of how many is that roughly?
So we have about 1,700 total across the district. We replaced 375 for the middle schools in 2019. So we have about a little over 500 left, 450, I think it's 415. I got to pull up my numbers for the high schools, and then we'll have completely replaced the 6 to 8 year old smart boards that we have in our buildings.
Okay, and that I assume is across, is there any schools in particular that have like older smart boards, or is this across the board, across the district?
So primarily just the high schools, which we have not replaced yet.
So for all the elementary, for example, they all have the latest, is that?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we are starting to get into a model that we started purchasing in 2018 that went into Constance Lane and Cherry Valley that we'll probably be looking at in probably another 2 years to replace. But for the most part, they're all on the new big touch screen devices as opposed to the projector and screen that we used to have in all the buildings.
And then on the refined one-to-one student device, I mean, one of the promises we've made is that zip code won't matter. And so one part of that, from my view, is the one-to-one, meaning individual students have their own device. And then the second is essentially what I call the hotspots, or the connectivity, which some of our students don't have. And so the one-to-one, meaning the device, I think everybody can see why, that would help, all our students. So can you speak to the other part of that, which is the connectivity part? Where is that in the budget?
Absolutely. So we have 2 items within the budget for that. That is that Comcast Internet Essentials that we had mentioned. Let me see what slide that was. That would be slide 178. And we had up to 100,000 families that we could support with that. We've created and we also have T-Mobile hotspots that are in that as well. So we created a tiered structure to support those students with those families that are in a Comcast service area that are not highly mobile, moving from home to home, that we offer the ability to provide sponsored internet for them. We've created a form that they can either fill out themselves or work with the offices in the buildings to fill that out, and we provide them an access code that they work with Comcast and get that paid for by the district. The other piece we put into play, because not all of our students are in a consistent home. They're either highly mobile, and we do have some homeless students that we provide T-Mobile hotspots for. Again, with that same process and working through those buildings. And we've communicated that program relatively well to all our buildings, and we've had quite a few folks reaching out. Another piece of that process is we do have, really since 2018, we've added to the online registration, or not the online, the registration enrollment process, 3 questions that survey the internet access, so we can kind of get a feel every year on what we might need to help provide for internet service for those students, and we've been kind of using that as a baseline when we project what that cost is going to look like.
So whether it's when students were remote or now when they're basically on site, the fact is that would it be fair to say that every student in the Rockford Public Schools has both a device, which is theirs and only theirs, and connectivity that is supplied, if they don't have it, by the district?
Yes, I will say that with the connectivity is available. So I can't speak on that everyone that has I can't speak on those who haven't reached out to ask for that support. But we do the best we can to provide when we're aware of the situation.
Yeah. So it would be important for our community partners to understand that every family has this available to them, and that, one of the things that people can help with is helping families on that side so that they have their own devices and they can take advantage of that. And that, to me, is a huge advantage. The other part to this is we've got the ed tech support that you've got as part of the budget. And the purpose of ed tech, from my point of view, is to ensure that we've got educational programs that our students can use going forward on the kinds of careers that will pay benefits to them over a long period of time, so that the ed tech folks are there to make sure that the teachers know what's available, how to use it, and that all this is done in coordination with both curriculum and with the schools part. I mean, would that be true?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, so from my point of view, one of the things that we don't get enough credit for is the fact that RPS 205 is probably one of the few places, I don't know, maybe there are other schools in our area that have some of this, but we have really put down the marker for having resources for our students who cannot afford it themselves to make sure that we're giving them that opportunity, and we're providing the support on the education side to make sure that our teachers have the support and the places to go for not just direction, but implementation. So it means that practical lessons in those classrooms, number one, we have smart boards that all the teachers have available where they can integrate their classroom work, and that our students can take that home and work on it on their own pace. And even students who aren't there for whatever reason, like they're sick, really could be doing some work. So the point is, not saying that they are, maybe even that they should, but the fact that we are offering a lot. So one of the things I want to say is that this budget represents, from my point of view, the two sides of what we're trying to do for our students. This is practical. This is implementation. One is the equipment that our students need. Two is the actual educational support that makes that happen. Because one of my comments, and I've said this for a long time, one-to-one does us no good if the education part is not there. So I'm way in favor of the ed tech positions, because that's what makes it practical. Most of our teachers, I mean, if you talk to teachers, don't have any kind of technical background or very limited. And so we have people that really are, and that's increasing, I admit, but the fact is, on how to apply the education to that classroom, we need people to be able to do that, and we need them out in the buildings. And from what I understand, those ed tech positions are exactly that, where we apply the knowledge out in the buildings for the teachers to use on a practical basis. So, I mean, I would say that this budget really helps us in working to that goal of trying to make the differences go away by zip code. I hear that a lot. I'm going to tell you right now, this is one of the ways to do it. And if our community partners want to do something, they need to get involved in this kind of stuff. This is a practical example where if you have people out in the community, they should learn this stuff, because that will help those kids get their lessons, and they have a means of doing it. So I really, I think this budget and the position of the IT department is really helping us. And the other part I'm glad to see here is the whole security part. We've had a number of incidents, and make no mistake, our commitment to security is really part of keeping our buildings and our students safe. So I'm really pleased to see a number of the things that we're spending money on.
Any other questions?
I just have a very quick question. Can you just give a little bit more elaboration on digital citizenship, please? Because I'm not familiar with it.
So the whole concept of digital citizenship and the digital scope and sequence is it's a progressive approach that looks at different grade levels and what the students should know from a technology perspective, like how to log in, how to what safety is on the internet and things that they should be looking for. And it's a progressive approach from, I believe, kindergarten all the way through 12th grade and by a specific level. And I'm happy to share documents with you as well that shows the process that our ed tech team has been working really diligently on. But it's a progressive growth for those students to be really good stewards of how they use the internet and how they present themselves online.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Barthel.
Thank you.
We have no follow-up items that were presented at the Committee of the Whole, and that concludes the report of the Planning and Development Committee.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent portion of our meeting, which includes items previewed by the board committee chairs during the Committee of the Whole. We have payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, air travel, construction pay request log, monthly cash and investment report for January of 2022, financial results for January of 2022, the UFB 22-31 E-rate 2022 infrastructure. We also have consent items from the governance committee, which are the meeting minutes for 2/8/22 and contract purchase orders and freedom of information log. The first group of items was from performance and monitoring. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And are there any consent items board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Seeing none, please call the roll on the approval of the consent items on 6 and 7, please.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
We're now at the closed session consent agenda, including the resolution authorizing the dismissal of probationary teachers, the notice to remedy for Aaron Sherman, the notice to remedy for Daniel Kane, the HR organizational report and addendum, as well as the following student disciplines. 4452 will be expelled for the remainder of the 21-22 school year through the first semester of the 22-23 school year. 4453, the expulsion is held in abeyance contingent upon an expulsion and abeyance agreement for the remainder of the 2021-22 school year. 4454 is expelled for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. 4455 is expelled for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. 4457 is expelled for the remainder of the 2021-22 school year through the first semester of the 2022-23 school year. 4458 is expelled for the remainder of the 21-22 school year through the first semester of the 22-23 school year. 4460 is expelled for the remainder of the 21-22 school year through the first semester of the 22-23 school year. 4461 is expelled for the remainder of the 21-22 school year through the entire 22-23 school year. 4462 is expelled for the remainder of the 21-22 school year through the first semester of the 22-23 school year. 4464 is expelled for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. 5020, the 4-day suspension is affirmed. The following are student EIAs: 8408, 8420, 8422, 8423, 8424, 8428, 8430, 8431, 8432, 8433, 8535, 8436. It's a typographical error, is it not? I apologize. So it is 8435. 8436, 8437, 8438, 8439, 8440, 8441, 8442, 8443, and 8444. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent items?
Second.
Are there any closed session consent items board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Ms. Pearson?
8A.
Okay.
9A. 9C. 9D. 9E. And 9G.
Are there any others? Ms. Pearson, shall we, when we get to those, would you like me to take them together or separately?
separately.
All right. I'm see no other lights. All right. I'm going to ask the coordinator to call the roll on the consent agenda, closed consent agenda items that have not been pulled.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Abstain.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 abstain.
I will now take a motion and a second to approve the resolution authorizing the dismissal of probationary teachers.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Would the coordinator please call the roll?
Ms. Mohammed?
No.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
No.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 2 noes.
I'd take a motion and a second for the expulsion for 4452 for the remainder of the 21-22 school year through the first semester of the 22-23 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
No.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Abstain.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstain.
I would take a motion and a second for student discipline 4454 to be expelled for the remainder of the 21-22 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
No.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Abstain.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstain.
I'll take a motion for student discipline and a second for student discipline case 4455, who is to be expelled for the remainder of the 21-22 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
No.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Abstain.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstain.
I'll take a motion in a second for student discipline case 4457, who is to be expelled for the remainder of the 2021-22 school year through the first semester of the 2022-23 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
No.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Abstain.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstain.
I'll take a motion in a second for student discipline case number 4460 to be expelled for the remainder of the 2021-22 school year through the first semester of the 2022-23 school year.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Would you please call the roll?
Ms. Pearson?
No.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Abstain.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstain.
Thank you. We are now on to item 11, which is other business, new business agenda recommendation. Do board members have any new business to bring to the board or agenda recommendations? I don't have any action steps outstanding unless I've missed something. Please help me out. No? I'll take, if there's no further comments or agenda recommendations, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Same side? Thank you. Good night. We are adjourned at 8:34.